The cosmological circle. Okay, so one of our favorite geometric diagrams, Scott, I would say. I don't want to speak for you, but from my own point of view, I've made many mandalas with this geometric shape. I've meditated on it deeply. I find it like such a rich treasure trove of a journey through geometry like no other. What do you think about it?
Oh, I agree. It's a real masterwork, and it comes from John Michell. The central part of this diagram comes from John Michell, and we were both really very aware of it. And when I was looking at the Dendera Zodiac, I noticed that all these hands from these Horuses and Isises seem to touch the circles in and so I superimposed John Michell's diagram on the Dendera Zodiac, and it's amazing. There's this incredible resonance between them. So it makes me think that John Michell, who discovered this in our lifetimes, this diagram, was tapping into something far more ancient, because there's this uncanny resonance with this ancient Egyptian kind of planisphere. And
Can I
there's
jump in here, Scott, just to ask you, to clarify a few of the qualities or the attributes of the diagram. So some people may not have heard of the cosmological diagram. So like my attempt to explain it is quite simply, it's essentially like it has one circle in the center and it's surrounded by 12 circles in this kind of particular way in batches of 3, basically, that go around the circumference of this circle. And encoded in it is all these relationships between the Earth and the Moon, and there's all this astrological connection.
There's a lot of layers. This is a very deep diagram, and we're just going to skim the surface here, I think. But we've got 12 around 1. So there's a resonance with astrology, with the signs of the zodiac. But there's also kind of a calendrical aspect and a resonance with the great year. The great year is the precession cycle of Earth. 25,920 years. And so each one of these circles would be 2160 years in that great year. But it's also 1 year. So these could each be an astrological sign within 1 year. And isn't it fascinating? Like, what is it? A human life what's the relationship between a human life and the great year, Geoff? Do you know?
I don't actually know. Tell me.
Well, I think it's like 1 degree in the great year would be like the arc of a person's life, like 72 years.
Sure.
You could live longer than that, of course, but this is a good measure of like the whole arc of a life. And it reminds me a little bit of the 7-pointed star has a resonance with a human life in Shakespeare. And I pulled up this quote. In all the men and women merely players, they have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. So Shakespeare has this kind of connection with the human life and the 7 ages of your entire life.
Yeah, the 7 is very central to the diagram. 7 and 12, isn't it? 7 and 12. There is a big component of it as well, and the relationship between 7 and 12. But I wanted to just jump back to that link to the great year, because one of the things I do know about the diagram is it takes 2,160 years for the precession to move through one sign of the zodiac, correct? And so for it to go through every sign of the zodiac, to do a full cycle through the zodiac, you multiply 2160 by 12.
It's 25,920.
Yeah, 25,920. And then, but what's really uncanny about this diagram is, coincidentally, you could say the diameter of the moon happens to be exactly 2160. And this diagram, miles, this diagram, like literally, like pumps out the relationship of the size of the moon relative to the size of the Earth. It's another central motif of it,
There's so many layers here in this diagram, and
but I want to cheerlead you a little bit, Scott, because like what's amazing about this diagram, that it's very rich and very ancient, but I think like you deserve a huge amount of credit, because you were the person that linked this to it's a ceiling print into the Dendera temple in Egypt. Isn't that where it's from?
I've seen it in the Louvre. It's suspended as a ceiling. You know, it was the ceiling of the Dendera temple in Egypt. And
Wow.
in the Napoleonic times, they cut it out of there and brought it to France.
Yeah.
And it's it's um, it's kind of a key to unlocking a lot of the ways that the Egyptians looked at the heavens, right? And
Yeah.
what we're not seeing, what the diagram is obscuring, is all of the different gods they had representing the constellations in here. But
Yeah.
so that's something you could Google and look up yourself. But this diagram has an uncanny resonance with the Dendera Zodiac, doesn't it? With
It
the
does.
hands holding
It fits
those circles.
perfectly. You
Yeah.
can't ignore. I think on every circle there's two hands exactly, not three, not one, and there's not one hand missing. There's not one hand on that holding circumference circle where those gods are holding the circles.
Yeah.
There's two hands hold up every single circle. It's pretty undeniable that there's a resonance between the diagram
That's why I
and
think
that's
John Michell tapped into something deeper and older that was known
yeah.
before, and he just happened to rediscover it
That's
later.
the thing.
Yeah.
And let's close on this because Jean Michel is kind of like, he's the first to say that it's not like he invented this diagram. And even the Egyptians didn't invent this diagram. But there's kind of like, there's these truthful, beautiful, good archetypes that seem to always exist. And at certain points in our evolution, they rise into consciousness, you
And
know, and
we
it's like,
rediscover them. Like
exactly.
we may think that we've invented it, but in truth, there's nothing new under the sun,
Yeah.
and we've just
Yeah.
rediscovered it, you know. And I would love to hear what you all think in the comments.
Let us know. Thank you.